This is the More to Life Than Money podcast. Real people, real stories, real conversations about wealth and abundance with your host, J.W. Rayhans.
Well, welcome everybody back to the More to Life Than Money podcast. You know, today we get to have this very interesting conversation. And for any of you that have already met Rob, you'll know why I use the word interesting, because quite honestly, there's a lot of different directions that this could go today. And he doesn't even have Sally here with him to kind of make sure that he stays under control. So, you know how sometimes when you're listening to something, they give you those warnings ahead of time of like, beware of what you might hear. I feel like that could be an appropriate part of the way we start our conversation today. I tell you what, though, really kind of just be ready to engage. And that might sound strange to say for a podcast episode, but I really mean it. For all of you listening, just be ready to engage in the conversation. I mean, Rob, our guest, he does get to serve as the chief of Gilbert Fire and Rescue, but he's at this kind of phase in life where there's so much going on. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility professionally, in life. You know, he's a husband, he's a dad. He also helps care for a parent. And so, man, if you ever feel like you're just in one of these phases of life where there's just a lot of stuff going on, and even amongst the chaos, you can find the calm, and you can find ways to really create, Rob, the way you say, beautiful things. That's what I'm hoping everybody gets out of our conversation today. So, Rob, thank you for joining us. Thanks for this conversation that we're about to have. And I just look forward to seeing where it goes from here.
No, Jade, I appreciate it. And like you said, Sally has abandoned me in my time of need. Unfortunately, she had something come across her desk that she couldn't get out of. So I am without a handler.
That's right.
I'm quite certain there were things she said I'm probably not supposed to talk about, but I can't remember what those were. So, Sally, this is on you for whatever happens or doesn't happen. So it's like a good married couple. Clearly, it's her fault. Just like if I get sunburned because I don't put sunscreen on, that's Sally's fault. I'm a toddler living in the world, so it's really up to her. So appreciate
There's probably
that.
some other husbands that feel the same way that you do. And Sally, I just want you to know that when you watch this, I did my best. That's all I can. That's all I can promise.
That's all we can do. I've been disappointing her for 32 years now of marriage, let alone a couple years before that. So,
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I feel like she deserves a huge congratulations for that as well.
Yes. Hey, poor Sally is what I normally say in this instance. That's what most other people say, actually. They just have that look on their eye like, oh, this poor woman. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of how it goes for us.
Yeah. I tell you what, Rob, can we start here? And it's it's because I want to highlight this current position that you get to have as fire chief. Not many people get to serve in a role like that comes with that level of responsibility. There was a process that went into that. There's a path, there's a journey that's gone into that. But there's something that happened in your preparation before you were given that assignment that I think does highlight a lot when it comes to successful relationships, successful marriages. And that is, you and Sally went on a walk often during the process of being interviewed, if you will. And this is within a department, within an organization that knew you well. You've been a part of Gilbert for a long time. Walk us back through, what was that like to have to go for something like that, to go for a position that's that public, that's kind of that prestigious, if you will. But what did you do in the way that you approach that? And there's a reason I want to start here, and it's because we're going to dance a little bit between different phases of your life that I'm hoping people latch onto, that they capture along the way. But let's start there. You don't know that you're going to get to be fire chief yet, but you want it. What was it that you and Sally did during that time period that kind of helped strengthen your guys' relationship, even though there was this really stressful time period because of what you were interviewing for?
Sure, that's fair. And I'll say that Sally has been a part of my journey in public safety and the fire department from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. Our successes have come together, and she's always been along for that journey. And not everyone does it that way. Mm-hmm. And I'll start off by saying there's certain firefighters, police officers that want to protect their families from a lot of the yucky stuff that we do. And unfortunately, they tend to get a little overprotective. And they also don't share the amazing stuff we do.
Okay.
And I've talked to all my new captains. I like engaging the families and spouses because I think it makes us stronger and it makes them a part of it. We can't just kind of put them off to the side and say, this isn't this different life. Mm-hmm. I think they're integrated because we all know those two things are integrated. Personal life, professional, it's always is together. And when I really started and looked at the opportunity to challenge myself, and that's my career has been defined by challenges and accepting that next challenge.
Write that down. Yeah.
I think I met with 62 people before the process, 6 months leading up to it.
Yeah.
To get feedback and ideas. And shockingly, not all the feedback was good. And it was important. And then as we talk, I've talked about this a bunch of times, is that we had a rhythm when I went through this process of I would meet with people, take notes, come back, and at night, eat dinner. We go for about a 1.5 mile walk. And through that process, we kind of talk about what feedback I received that day. And we kind of work through the good and the bad. And I'll say this for Sally, she is incredibly loyal.
Wow.
And they mentioned how I messed this up. And, that wasn't you. That was something else. And she would always find a reason why it wasn't my fault. I'm like, no, babe, I really messed that up. So we've kind of learned if I'm looking for professional advice on feedback, I really can't go with Sally because she is so loyal to me and her family that she would just, no, that wasn't you.
Defense mode.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I appreciate that loyalty, but terrible for professional advice. And we talked about this at length, but there's no surprises. But the first half of that walk was always kind of processing how it went. And then the second half of that was, okay, we did that. Now let's talk about what you're going to do tomorrow and what you're going to do along the line. And that really made her a part of the process. And I always add a little bit of color to this is the loop we have about 1.5 miles. There's probably 6 or 8 different times we have to cross a residential street. And this actually started in New York. We're on a trip to New York to visit our daughter when she was in Brooklyn. And we always felt like Sally was just going to stumble out in the middle of the street because all the crosswalks are different. And I don't think she would have, but we like, Maddie, you got to hold your mom's hand. She's going to walk on the wrong side of the street or something. So every time before we cross a residential street, I have to hold her hand because if not, she's like a toddler and she'll toddle off into the street.
Keep walking.
Right. And now if I forget to hold her hand, she'll toddle off. It's a whole thing. If you've been married a long time, this is just dumb things married couples do.
I thought you were trying to show yourself as the hero, this life-saving moment every time you crossed a residential street.
It's just how the thing we play. And we still to this day will do that. And it's just, but it's connecting. Yeah. And that walk was an opportunity for us to connect, make it part of the journey. And holding the hand when crossing the street again, it's just a little part of that story of ours that was a part of that. And I remember there was one walk. I think I remember it was where I part of the interview process. I didn't think I did well. That was the one time where almost the entire walk was in solitude. Wow. Because we were both processing the heaviness of where I thought things weren't going to work out well. And we both remember it was like, that was the one time where we didn't have a lot to say for the second half of that walk because she didn't know what to say. I was still processing. It was a really interesting time. I remember all that process, but that has a lot to do with Sally's journey with me because she's as much a part of any success we have because of the support. She's always, and this has been true for when I promoted for captain and engineer and all along the way. Yeah. She's been a part, going back even as far as Casa Grande. Yeah. My first job, real full-time fire department. She found the listing in the newspaper. There was, for the listeners, there was a newspaper back in the day. It was this big sheet of paper with a bunch of words on it.
It's probably a good thing you're describing what that really is.
Exactly. And that's where the job listing was. If not for her, I never would have even seen that post. So the origin of really my time as a professional firefighter go back to her and her involvement in it. So,
thank you for even just describing to us the inclusion that you guys have had in each other's lives along the way. Because as you mentioned, especially in public safety, and by the way, it's that way in some other careers too, is sometimes, we try to keep those two parts of our lives separate, or we try to protect, quote, our families from various aspects of the work that we do. But what you highlighted was the ways that you really kept it so that this was a pursuit together. It was things that you included her in. And that is something that any of us can work on a regular basis, because none of us get that right all the time. But yet you're highlighting just how important that is. And you mentioned that there's been challenges along the way throughout life. So in fact, challenges have been a part of what has led you to where you are today. How has that helped in other aspects of your life or other relationships where, because of that inclusion, because of even just the way you did the walks together, the way you are very open, the way that you process things, how has that helped in other relationships, even if they're professional relationships? How's it poured over, if you will?
I would say the willingness just to ask questions and listen. And that's part of it too, is as we talk through, and I don't know if you know this or not, firefighters are notoriously terrible listeners. When you're in a fire station, your career is built around this. Most of the time, you're just waiting for your buddy to stop talking so you can tell a better story, a more funny story, or demonstrate that you know more about something. So there's lots of talk in a fire station. Very little listening is actually happening. We're world-renowned terrible listeners.
This is good insight.
It is, and it's what we are. You just have to own it, and then kind of come.
By the way, there's a human nature aspect to that too. Generally speaking, we tend to be better at talking than we are at listening. We tend to be better at wanting to share the next story and have the next thought before we actually truly are present and listen to what's happening in that moment. So
there you go.
So for any of you listening, this is applicable not just in public safety, not just in fire. So let's continue down that. So there's a recognition of, hey, generally speaking, firefighters, great at talking, not great at listening.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do as a leader in order to make that different?
One of the greatest lessons I had during this process that I'm describing through the fire chief process was I met with Chief Tom Shannon from Scottsdale. I think he's our most tenured fire chief in the Valley.
Okay.
Great individual. And talking through him, went through some of his processes. And at the end of that, he looked at me and he said, "What's your blind spot?" And I thought I was going through my normal style. Too much of my career was ego. And I start talking through this. And he goes, No. He goes, "It's a blind spot. You don't know what the thing is that you're doing that have a negative impact on people." I go, "Well, I'm trying to answer." He goes, "I don't want you to answer." He goes, "How long have you been married at this point?" 28 years. He goes, "Ask your wife." He goes, "They know us better than we give them credit."
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, here we go. And this is along the lines of listening, which is going to be to answer your question. So I'm leaving the Starbucks. I'm so excited because we talked about the walk, right?
Yeah.
Like, I got good material now. Get in the car. I just about hit Scottsdale. Hey, babe, we got something Chief Shannon wants to know, something we can talk about tonight and think about. He wants to know what my blind spot is. What's that thing that I do? She goes, "Oh, I know what it is."
She didn't need time to think about it.
I said, "No, Chief Shannon said you had to think about it." She goes, "I don't have to think about it." And now I'm in that weird, irritated, I'm irritated, but I'm not really mad.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conversation goes, and I said, "Well, you're going to think about it. I don't have to think about it." Long story short, we're on our walk. We all know what's coming. I said, "Babe, now that you had time to think about it," which she said, "You're an idiot. Let me tell you why. Your daughter does the same thing." But to answer your question, she said, "I'll have a conversation with you and you give me no feedback. Just nothing." She goes, "I have no idea whether you're supportive of it, you think it's a terrible idea, or you're just like, I just want her to stop talking at some point."
She wouldn't know.
And I gave no feedback. And she goes, "When your daughter does it, it really gets her." And then I thought back a conversation the week before I had with our employee wellness member who was pitching the idea originally of our therapy dog.
Okay.
And I went, "Oh no," because I replayed it and I sat and I remember in my mind, I was processing, this is a great idea. How are we going to make this happen? I got to get legal involved, but I don't want to do them first because legal always says no because they're risk. I got to get them when they have to say yes. That's a little trick out there. Don't go to legal first ever.
Yeah.
Go to them. Just wait a while.
Some people are going to write that down, Rob.
It's okay.
That's right.
They already know it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, I know my boss loves dogs. So like if I could introduce this dog to my boss, then she'll most like, so I'm processing this.
Yeah.
Never once did I look at Jody and say, "Hey, this is a great idea." So sure enough, she left. And as I'm replaying this, at first day I went back to talk to Jody. I said, "Jody," she goes, I thought you were completely against the idea." And two important things happened. And one's an absolute tragedy. I realized, Jody, I said, okay, I forgot to say, the blind spot Sally gave me, I should have led with that, was exactly that. You give me no feedback, right? And I realized professionally that I had done that.
Yeah. And
then Jody confirmed it, which now I had to, "Hey, Jody, this is what I was thinking." Sally even said, "You're processing, but you don't give any feedback." I said, okay. So since then, I've always tried to be very intentional about listening, not just listening, but that providing that, "Hey, I am listening to you, giving some feedback." The tragedy in this moment was, I talk about how our wives know us, spouses know us, and we think you can't possibly understand my career because it's so different. As a person, Sally was right in a professional setting. And I realized, man, I'm going to have to tell her. So we were kind of replayed that, but of course they do know us. So talking about how we learn to listen, that was a lesson I learned that I didn't expect. And it ended up being kind of a funny thing because it relates to the 6 months and going on the walks. But firefighters are terrible listeners. And in this case, I was listening, but not giving any feedback. So I'm very cautious now about giving some, even if it's, "Hey, I'm processing."
It wasn't even just the listening part. It was letting the other person know that you were listening. In your case, you were internally processing.
Correct.
But they didn't know that. They didn't know what was happening. They were left to question where you stood and where you sat.
Very different opinions on how that
Absolutely.
meeting went, despite people who were very present in it.
Well, and this is great for any of us to listen to, and again, just to be writing down of how often do we have these interactions with people on a daily basis, whether it's in our personal lives or professional lives, with friends, just hanging out, in a setting where, you know, maybe something does need to be advocated for. But how often? Think about how frequently this type of scenario happens, and you've given us some specific examples of that importance of listening, and that's something we hear regularly. You hear that a lot. There's this importance of listening, but what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening while you listen? And I think that's what you've shared with us, is what's happening while you listen. That does give feedback, whether it's a body language, whether it's verbal, but that you're showing someone that you are listening, that you are hearing them, and that you are providing some level of feedback. You know, Rob, I mentioned in the intro, you're kind of in this phase of life where there's a lot of different things happening. There's a lot of different dynamics in your life. You're in a state where there is some ways that you're caring for your mom. There's some ways that you continue to have responsibilities in your marriage as a husband. You're a dad to Maddie. You have a professional responsibility that is great leadership. In fact, it's the top leadership position in a fire department. How in the world do you handle all that? How do you handle so many different dynamics?
I would say it's a learned trait. The first year was, as fire chief, was difficult. I still had to do the fire chief job, then an assistant chief job, because we were getting promoted up, vacancies, and then training the next person. It was a lot. But I always say, hire the right people, promote the right people, and eventually your problems go away if we keep doing that.
So that handles the professional side.
It
You
is.
got a lot of dynamics besides that.
We do, and you know, we're pretty fortunate. Maddie, our daughter, has always been a very independent kid. You know, she at 18, she moved to New York to go to school up there in Utica, New York. We had to look up where Utica was, upstate. We didn't know.
That wasn't an easy move, though, was it?
No, it was not. That was tough, you know, and so we had to kind of manage that as we're empty nesters, kind of rolling through that time frame, which was interesting. But I think what we found, as far as Sally and I found, was we've always had each other. I'm at my core, I'm relationship driven. And when under stress, I will retreat to that relational state. And for me, my soft, fuzzy blanket is home with Sally. So kind of the more pressure I got, the more inward I would really go and focus on that. But, you know, I physically, I was out of whack during this time. I've lost 40 pounds over the last few years.
Yeah, I know. You've been looking strong,
so
man.
it's kind of the shifted, kind of we look at the triangle: physical, financial, emotional, health, and wealth. You know, and this is supported by a Struggle Well program that we're all doing at the fire department.
Hey, you rolled through that pretty quick. Let's slow that down for everybody for a moment.
Yeah.
Physical, financial, emotional.
Physical, financial, emotional, health, and wealth. I call it the FF&E.
Okay.
And I know physical starts with a P, but it's easier to say the
It's
FF.
easier to say.
Yeah, it just doesn't work any other way.
Yep. So let's break that down just a little bit. So this is a topic that I think could be very helpful to people. So write that down, FF&E. Let's walk through it. Give us the high level. What do each of those mean? Why is it that you're even leading that kind of an effort?
They all impact each other. When one's out of whack, it affects the other. I think, you know, financial pressures. You know, it's not always about what you make, it's what you spend. But if you think of a young couple that is $50,000 in debt, you wake up in the morning and it's like someone puts a heavy blanket on you and you carry that until you go to bed and it's waiting for you the next morning. Decisions, arguments, it impacts things as a couple that puts additional strain and stress. Physically, just the ability to live a long, healthy life, you know, and long into retirement so that, you know, you can live a long, healthy, and you can move. I'll talk about movement here in a little bit.
Please.
And that was, my physical was out of whack. Financially, I was in a good place. Emotionally, I was in a good place, but my physical side was off. And about a year after the promotion, Sally looked at me and said, look, hey, I gave you a year. You have a stressful job. I want you to live a long time for your retirement, so we need to get this fixed. And that's really when I kind of woke up and said, you know what, you're right. And that's kind of when I started that journey, which would be 3 years ago now. Yeah. You know, and a lot of commitment that got me there. So I feel that, I think, is rebalanced now.
So just real quick on that, what's been the rewards of that? Because you mentioned these three, they're integrated. They impact one another. 3 years after this refocus on the physical, what rewards have you seen pour over into the other areas?
more energy,
Mhm.
being able to get, as far as getting work done.
Mhm.
I think it's important as a fire chief
Mhm.
to set the example, and I didn't
Mhm.
for a number of years.
Yeah.
I can't invent a time machine,
Mhm.
but I think we all have a right to evolve.
Mhm.
And so I think you just kind of get treated differently as
Mhm.
far as that level of respect when
Yeah.
you come in with that, because it shows a dedication
Yep.
to those sorts of things, and you got to put the work in. So
Yep.
I think that's part of it. Beyond just living a long life, is what you represent and project
Yeah.
is important
Yeah.
as it relates to that. And then all the
What you
blood values and
represent and
everything else
project.
as far as living a long life for the physical side of it, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for
hmm
sharing that.
hmm
Okay. Now, in our conversations in the More to Life Than Money podcast, we don't always spend a lot of time on like quote financial topics. I'm going to ask you about it though, because this is something you've been very passionate about for as long as I've known you, and not for your own personal reasons, also for the reasons of others. Why is it that you care so much about helping others with the financial part of their life? And why has that been kind of something you've stood with, you've carried, you've poured into others when it comes to that? You've led efforts to make sure that there's good financial education, but why?
I have to say, probably originally starts my parents, my father, typical baby boomer, provided for our family.
Mm.
So I think you just kind of learn that. But what the real trigger for me, and I give in this case all the credit, and I'm going to say the old firefighters from Casa Grande.
Okay.
This goes back to
Tell us.
1995,
Okay.
and I was 25 years old. That was my first professional job. I worked for Rincon Valley, but down in Tucson for a couple years. But this was really like your first kind of big city, as big a city as Casa Grande is. And when you showed up at Casa Grande, most of the department, with an older department, but
Mhm.
most of the employee had been there for a while. I had a few captains that were right at retirement
Okay.
after 20, 25 years.
And you're brand new at this point, right?
Yeah, 25 years old.
Yeah.
Their retirement. I'm just excited. I'm on a fire truck, and it was a culture there that the retired, soon to be retired, and older members of that department literally grabbed young firefighters and said, "Hey, what's your retirement plan?" I'm like,
Really?
"Well, I'm in PSPRS. I got 50%. I made it." And they said, "Do you have any idea imagine living off of 50% of what you make right now?" I go, "Well, I can't do that."
Mhm.
Exactly. And so they literally sat you down with a piece of paper and said,
So they
"Hey,
kind of
here's
blew
what
up
I
this
did."
idea that your pension was going to take care of you.
They did. It's not
Yeah.
enough. And they literally sat you down. And back then, the 457 product, which is like a 401k
Mhm.
for most people, was a vehicle that was very effective. And my group sat me down. "Hey, are you making more money you've ever made before?" "Yeah." "Well, how much?"
Mhm.
They marched me across the street to HR and said, "Put this much down."
Yeah.
And it just started from day one. And they would show you, "Hey, here's what my 457 money did for me. Here's my retirement. This is the stuff I was able to do because I did this." And it was just ingrained in the culture of the Casa Grande Fire Department that from day one, you are planning for your retirement. Now, you can do that through having your own business. You could invest in real estate. But for most of us, the 457 product was easy. You put a number down and you start, and then every year you bump it by 1% or 2.
Mhm.
Next thing you know, you're going to max that out, and you'll have this big bag of money to offset what you're going to lose from the pension. And only 5% of the country has pensions anymore.
Yeah.
So we're incredibly fortunate, but you're going to need that separate bag of
Yeah.
money.
So what you got to experience was, here you are, 25 years old, new firefighter, and there's these firefighters, they've been around a while, and they basically said, "Look, here's some things you need to do." And they took you and they walked you through it. And so this is the part where we mentioned legal before. I'm going to mention compliance. For any of you listening, this is not financial advice. Your specific situation may be different than what Rob's talking about. Here's what you can do with it, though, is you can see, how does this apply? What principles can I gather from what you're sharing? And so now fast forward. So you've got these guys, these gentlemen, they're saying, here's how you need to kind of go through this. What does that turn into when you go over to Gilbert then, and now you're showing the same kind of care to a bunch of other firefighters?
Gilbert was very different. I came over, I had about 3.5 years down in Casa Grande when I full-time at Gilbert, and Casa Grande was the only real department I knew. So I assumed that this was just fire department culture. And then I arrive in Gilbert and I start talking about 457, and they're like, "Oh, well, we have it." Oh, huh. Well, what about, they started asking, some of the senior members, and it was just kind of an afterthought. And I went, this is not what I expected. But what I think I figured out was when Gilbert became a fire department in 93, they didn't have old firefighters. They didn't have old, sage, experienced firefighters. We were kids that grew up from rural metro and then transitioned. There was a couple that had a plan, but what I saw was most of didn't have a structured like plan from the very beginning. And that's when I started getting involved in some of the local and say, do you guys mind if I kind of step into this space?
Yeah.
And then started showing up at the academy, the first week of the academy, and say, hey, here's what we can do, and explaining it to people.
Yeah.
And that, I guess the passion was born from the old firefighters of Casa Grande.
Yeah, that's what they poured into
and
you.
Now their tradition lives on, and that I was able to carry that to Gilbert, and others have kind of gone on. But I was really surprised that I thought it was just that way for all fire departments.
Yeah.
But,
well, can I hit the pause button here? It's because here's something where you're addressing something much bigger than even just this idea of like transferring knowledge in terms of financially. This is where you're really touching on a greater dynamic that we see in multiple different workplaces, which is generational experience and knowledge. And how is it that we create a workplace where that knowledge, that history, that expertise is honored in a way that it helps serve our younger workers, but our younger workers have the openness to accept that, but then also share kind of their just desire to learn, their ambition, and how is it that we blend all this together into a really healthy, thriving workplace. And I realize I'm expanding on a specific example that you've given, but I just wanted to highlight that for everybody of there's multiple different ways that when you really do kind of bring different generations together in the workplace, it can create something special. And so even what you described in Casa Grande, you didn't realize it was special. You just thought that was the way it was across fire departments. Coming to somewhere new gave you the insight to realize, wait a second, that was special in Casa Grande. How do we carry that into Gilbert? And now kind of bring us up. And obviously you don't have to share specifics about your and Sally's situation, but you mentioned earlier, you guys, you felt fine financially. You feel fine financially now. And what was it that along the way you've been able to look back and go, man, I was so lucky. Like what they poured into me in the beginning is what's helped us be where we are today. And then how do you continue to do that within Gilbert Fire now?
There's a couple things here I'm thinking of, and commitment. Sal and I talk about kind of as we talk to Maddie. She's in a relationship now, a very serious one, with young Brandon, his name is. Of our relationship's always been easy, and that was an important thing to Maddie. Don't overcomplicate, Maddie. If a relationship starts off easy, that's what you want. If it's complicated from the beginning, it's probably always going to be complicated. But we also talk about loyalty is a key point. Then the next one of that is sacrifice, in that we didn't need to have the fanciest cars. We didn't need to have the biggest house. The same house we've had for 23 years. Our financial outlook is the same now as it was when I was a captain on a fire truck. So we really haven't adapted, other than we travel now, we do, which is kind of, we do spend a decent amount of money there, but that's intentional. But it's just kind of sticking to that, the make some sacrifices. But it's kind of definitely the long game that we've done. But you talk about like the transitional as far as information. We're going through that even at the fire department right now. We got a retirement cliff coming. And I think a couple of examples that are related to how we transcend. And I will say we are hiring great people. I can't speak for how the hiring pool everywhere else. Our process is fantastic. The kids we hire want to learn. They learn fast. They're good. They're committed to the job. We have a great talent pool that's coming up. Now I can teach people how to fight fires. I can teach them how to ventilate roofs, teach all the skills we have. The hard part is how we transcend the instincts. I think Adam Hellman was one of our original firefighters. He was Gilbert Fire for 25, 30 years. When Adam Hellman would see a fire, he could look at it instinctively. We had a big fire not far from here years ago. He walked, hey, watch out, this one's different. He just knew. The spidey sense you get when you walk into someone's house, like, hey, something's not right here. That's the hard part. Trying to transcend those instincts is the challenge. We can do all the skill stuff. That's a piece of cake. But trying to kind of transcend and talk to company officers about developing those skills, that's a harder thing to do. And you just got to kind of lean into it and talk and understand if you make mistakes, what did you see? So that's what's going to take some time. But I think one of the other things we're trying to transcend here is talk about culture is James Nelson, one of our most beloved members. He died unexpectedly in 2018, basically from a brain aneurysm. James had a funny way of doing accountability. It was vocal, and everyone within earshot knew that you did not satisfy James's what you were supposed to do that time. And only he could get away with it.
I'm picturing this.
And they were spectacular. We call it James Nelson one-on-one.
Yeah.
Everyone heard it, and you did not meet his expectations. And it wasn't really till after he was gone that I realized was that James held you accountable in a way that no one else would. And I always thought accountability, even when I was an assistant chief, was about making sure you modify behavior before it can limit their career. That's half of it. I didn't figure it out till it was gone. Every time James did that, and he did it in spectacular fashion using words one should not use at work. He didn't say the words, but what he was telling you is, I love you and I care about you. Please stop doing this because it's going to impact your career or your reputation. You didn't feel it in the moment. It took hours, weeks, months. But if he didn't care, he wouldn't say anything.
Right.
And as I talk to my new company officer, I tell them, look, it's uncomfortable. It's difficult. But if I didn't care about you and I'm watching you submarine your career, hey, that's J-Dub's deal. I don't care. He's making his own mistakes. But if I cared and loved you, I'm going to say, hey, Jubby, stop doing this because this is what everyone's saying. And here's what's happening. And when I talk to my new captain, I say, if you want to keep the spirit of James Nelson alive in the Gilbert Fire Department, hold people accountable. Don't do it the way he did it. You got to find your own way. But this is one of those examples of a legacy of James can live beyond if they're willing to lean in and have some difficult conversations. It's not easy.
Right.
But to not have that conversation does not live up to the spirit of James and holding people accountable and truly telling our employees, I love you, I care about you, stop doing this.
Yeah. Well,
so that's one of those.
There is some depth there that we can unpack for people. And for any of you that are listening, this is where I hope you'll kind of like engage, like I said at the very beginning, engage into this piece of it, because where you started there is helping us realize that at the core it was because he cared and loved the other person. Now, the way that comes out, that's up for debate. How could that be done differently? How can you put your own flavor on it? Like, how would you show that? But if he didn't care and love, he wouldn't have mentioned it in the first place. And that there has to be sometimes hard conversations around that. But this is so applicable in many different areas of our life of if you do come from a place of love and care, then you can actually help someone else in some pretty positively impactful ways. And that's that spirit that you're talking about of willing to have the conversation, willing to have the one-on-one, willing to call out how they can improve, but it comes from a place of love and care. You actually reminded me of some interviews and stories I've heard of Coach Izzo, Michigan State head basketball coach. And, you know, people would catch video of him in players' faces on the court and things like that. And then I remember watching an interview where they asked him, like, how do you get away with that? How do you get away with treating your players like that? And, you know, he kind of sits up a little bit and goes, what do you mean? He goes, I love these guys. They know I love them. They know I want what's best for them. Sometimes I just have to help them get there. And all of a sudden you have this realization of, oh, wait, our perception of what we saw on camera is not what's actually going on here. And that's what you're describing as well, is when it comes from a place of this love and care, it's like, how can we show and express that in a way that we are willing to have that accountability?
It is. And that's why I tell each one of my new captains, you have to do it in your way.
Yeah.
James's way was a way only I couldn't do it, James. I literally have to say the words, I love you and I care for you. Please stop doing this. I can't do what James did. And sometimes it takes days, sometimes weeks, but I tell my new Kate, at some point, they're probably going to go back to you and say, hey, thanks for pointing that out because no one else cared enough to tell me what was happening.
Yeah. It's almost like there was an aftertaste there.
It's going to take a little while, but usually they'll come back and go, you know what? Yeah, you were the only one that cared enough.
Yeah.
So it is an important lesson. Difficult conversations, and they got to figure out how to do it. But that's how we do it, and that's how James's legacy lives beyond, in my opinion.
You mentioned sacrifice and loyalty earlier as like some core principles. Where do you see loyalty and sacrifice serving towards success? And I use that word success because we all have different definitions of that. But if somebody in their mind, they're listening to this or listening to our conversation, they say, yes, I have aspirations. I have some things I want to make sure happen in my life. Where does loyalty and sacrifice come into a success formula, if you will?
Loyalty, I think, is invest where you want to be. You know, and people move different jobs, different careers, you know, as a couple for Sally and I, you're never going to put the other person in a compromising position. Now that could be a relationship, but also be work relationships of if I'm loyal to Gilbert, I'm not going to say something that embarrasses a coworker or embarrasses the town, for goodness sake. I'm going to have those conversations in private. But at the end of the day, recognize where your loyalty lies, not put anyone in a bad place. I'm going to do everything I can not to let you down. And if I do maybe let you down, or I have my own accountability to own it and say, you know what, I need to listen to that feedback and then apply it. Loyalty, I think, is not falling, into the blame, victimhood type of thing. A whole Struggle Well program talks quite a bit about that, as far as don't fall victim to just blame game or victimhood or not being willing to own. To me, that's rooted in loyalty. Sacrifice, to me is about that. You're willing to put yourself out there. To promote is challenging and difficult. You have to take on new challenges. I talk a little bit how Sally and I sacrificed through the years. She would talk, maybe there's some career sacrifices for her during the time and movement through careers, and that kind of flexes depending on where that sacrifice lies. And I say sacrifice in a financial sense. I don't feel like we sacrificed anything financially to save the money we did.
Yeah.
That's just how we did
Why
it.
is that?
I don't know. We like the house we have. My parents made us drive the most crappy cars imaginable. Just part of the Duggan lifestyle is I drove the same crappy car that my sister drove, my brother drove, my grandmother drove before that. Did not have air conditioning. But that it was sacrifice, it's to be willing to look what the others have and not let that motivate you. Well, the others have the new this and the others have the new that. Try not to keep up with that. Yeah. We've always been grounded, I think, from both of our sides of the house, sacrifice. And, we're going to spend, we spent 4 hours at my sister's house cleaning out the room for mom. We're going to sacrifice what we're doing today because it's what we need to do for each other. Yeah. And identifying those, not falling victim to our own kind of selfish needs. And, even as a young couple, kind of understand there's things we should do, going out with your buddies. I'm going on a boys trip every other weekend to Vegas. Probably not the healthiest, not fun, but maybe not the best course of action for a couple to kind of progress through that. So I say that sacrifice in certain ways of making good decisions, whether as an employee or a marriage, they're related.
Yeah. Let me ask you about that as you reflect back on that now. So way life is now, and you think of some of these other like sacrifices, if you will, that were made before, and you reflect back on that, do you really feel like you missed out on anything? Missed out on much? Missed out on anything meaningful?
No, I don't. I really don't.
Yeah,
I think we've carved our life out, I think, in a beautiful way. Sally's sacrifice, she stayed home the first year that Maddie was born. I guess it's a sacrifice that she only worked part-time around my schedule, but that meant someone was always home for Maddie. We didn't have to, no deference to daycare. We were in a position we didn't have to do that, but we also made the sacrifices of old cars and other things to accomplish that. So that's where I think the sacrifice is appropriate. Yeah. That we never felt, we probably lived ourselves more paycheck to paycheck, but it was by choice. Yeah. That allowed her to stay home, until time Maddie was in school, and then she re-engaged back in full time. Didn't feel like a sacrifice, but I think others would look at it as such. Yeah. Well, you mentioned by choice, and I appreciate us staying on this, even this word sacrifice, because I do think that word can have a negative connotation to people a lot of times, where the word itself is not necessarily positive or negative. In the way that you're talking about it, it was based on choices that you guys made, and they might be viewed as, quote, sacrifices to other people, but for you guys, they were the meaningful decisions to make along the way because of the way you wanted to live your life, the way that you wanted to stay principled or values. And so that's why I appreciate the fact that we stayed on this word sacrifice for just a moment, so that other people could understand there's different ways to view sacrifices, and sacrifices can be service. Sacrifices can serve a life that you want to create. And that's what I'm hearing from you and from Sally is, yeah, you were willing to make these sacrifices, but it didn't feel like they were bad. It didn't feel like they were keeping you from anything. These were choices you wanted to make for the life that you were creating. Absolutely. And I think that's how we approached everything. Yeah. Through that way. It's just kind of as we evolve and as we live, we could say we sacrificed early in that time to have what we have now. And we are not going to be the couple that just sits on a bag of money in retirement. We're spending it. Yeah. Not all of it. You want to enjoy life, we'll leave some of it. Don't worry, Maddie, if you're listening. But that's what we're doing now. And that's why I talk about travel. That's kind of, we're in this kind of prime time now where we're going to do these things. Because it's, I think the now we're recognizing is time is more precious than money. Most times. Now, easy for us to say perhaps where we're at in life, but time's more valuable than money to us right now. And we're very intentional about that. And that's why we're going to go to Spain here in a few weeks and do that. But honestly, the greatest reward we get right now, back to time, We agreed early on, about 6 months after Maddie went to school, that we needed to do at least one thing together as a couple every month. Now we do like 2 to 3.
Yeah.
But it might just be we're going to go to Hotel Adeline this weekend on Friday, just to enjoy some pool time, meet people, go to the restaurants we like to go to. I got to tell you, today I come in on Monday. It's a hard day. I'm thinking, man, I just want to get to Friday afternoon, driving out to Adeline. Sally's going to meet me after work. I'll have everything unpacked for her because she works till 3 or 4 or 5.
Yep.
I'll have everything ready for her, and then it's just disconnect to the best of our ability and just enjoy our time together away from the grind. And the weekends, we don't have anything. I'm in my office Wednesday going, what do I have to look forward to this weekend? It just drags. So, and again, we don't always go to Spain. Sometimes it's just, hotel tonight. Let's just get somewhere.
Even
Phoenix,
there, there, you're giving us something. Like, how can you give yourself something to look forward to? How can you give yourself something to energize you? And you mentioned, at least at this stage in your guys' life, time is more valuable than money. And so I actually want to give that to all of you listening. Just take a moment to reflect on that. What does that mean to you when you hear that? Time is more valuable than money. Time is more valuable than money. When you pause, what comes to mind when you think time is more valuable than money? And what would you put into that time? And I want to leave that as an exercise, a reflective exercise for everyone listening to do. So if that means you have to hit the pause button and come back to our conversation, go ahead and do that. But time is more valuable than money. What does that mean to me today? And so let's pick up with this, or maybe conclude with this. So, Rob, there's a common thing that I ask all of our guests, and I'm going to word this a little bit differently with you, and maybe give just a couple extra minutes for you to kind of share this, because I want to paint a picture of, let's say, and I know you've had this moment over and over, but now you're in the position where you're trying to have that positive impact on a younger firefighter or a younger person, and you want to impart on them some things that you've learned along the way. And so what is it that you would share with someone? They come up to you, whether they're a firefighter or not, but they come up to you and they say, hey, guess what? You're the old guy I'm coming to.
Yeah, that's true.
You're the old guy I'm coming to. But I'm here to learn. I'm here to be open. I am here to listen. What would you share with them that you want to impart on them that would stick, and that they would leave and take that and implement that into their life?
Thank you for this question. Honestly, this is a lot of my time is spent on these. And there's 2 things. They're personal and professional. As we know, they're always connected. First one, and this is what the first day of the fire academy, I've been saying this for years now because of what we have, retirement cliff coming. First day of the academy, they're not going to remember anything. They're scared to death. They are scared to death. I asked to remember one thing: get comfortable being uncomfortable. In that, is scared. Jumping into academy is scary. And then, or how am I going to stack up? What are the physical requirements going to be? Am I going to be able to climb the ladder? Am I going to get claustrophobic? All these things are in their head. And then once they're done with the academy, they get comfortable with that, and then they go on a fire truck for a probationary assignment with 3 other grown-ass adults that are waiting for you. And they're going to show up and like, where do I sit for dinner? So don't worry. Wherever you sit at the dinner table, it's the wrong spot. So just it doesn't matter where you sit. It's going to be the wrong spot. And then you roll through that. And at some point as a firefighter, you're going to get a bitted spot. You're not roving. You're not moving your stuff every day. And you're like, okay, I made it. I'm here. That's the trap. I don't want to become a paramedic. I don't want to go to hazmat school. I don't know if I want to promote to engineer, because I have to get uncomfortable again. And when I look at our members that are willing to embrace getting uncomfortable, maybe they're on the job for a year or 2, then they go to paramedic school. And then maybe a year after that, they promote to engineer. And then they're always setting up for the next thing. You have to be willing to get uncomfortable, because you get set and all of a sudden you're a firefighter for 3-4 years. You've been passed up and now you're so comfortable, the thought of jumping in that space becomes paralyzing. Now I have to say this, there is a space for 25-year firefighters in our fire department.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, is a name I throw out a lot, be a Jack Glover. 25 years on the job. I had Jack for 5 years on my fire truck. All he ever wanted to do was make him and everyone else better.
Yeah.
He has mentored legions of kids on getting a fire department job, and he's still doing it today.
Yeah.
So there is a space for that, but I need engineers, I need captains, I need battalion chiefs. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. Is the first one. Second one's probably a little bit easier. We really learned this with Sally's lost both her parents. I've lost my dad. I've got my mom now, who's going to be living with my sister. through that is never stop moving. This goes back to the triangle.
Yeah.
Never stop moving physically. You stop moving physically and you're just going to wither away physically and then not have the quality of life you might want through the end of your life, to be able to go on walks, to be able to go on trips as long as possible.
Yeah.
So never stop moving physically for whatever your physical goal is. I like never stop moving financially for the reasons we talked before. Have a plan, implement a plan, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah.
And then emotionally, never stop moving. This is a lot of relationship stuff as a couple, all the things we talked about before, whatever the things you do. The little trip Sally and I do this weekend is a great example of that. We're always moving forward on those things. So once you stop moving in any one of those, it's like anything else. It just kind of withers, and my parents physically stopped moving. And we saw some of that effect on them kind of later in their life when they really didn't do much. They were just kind of stuck in the house, and it just kind of became scary, to do that. So those are the two things I think that kind of I go to the most with talking with young firefighters. It kind of combine those two, and it fits work and home and everything else.
Yeah.
And is goal-based, which I think is important.
Absolutely. Firefighter or not, I hope you've made it this far in the conversation, because this is where you take this and you implement it in your own life. And you really look at, okay, how can I take these two nuggets and really make them my own? In other words, how do I take this principle, if you will, of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable? How do I apply that in my own life? And how many different ways can I apply that in my own life? And then never stop moving, always keep moving. How does that apply in every area of my life? And really write that down. Get specific for you. What does that mean to you? How do you implement that in your own life? So here's where we're going to finish up. Wealth and abundance. Two common words, lots of different meanings. Where you're at right now, if someone said, what is wealth and abundance? What would you tell them?
Wealth and abundance. Wealth, I would say, is, in a financial sense, having enough to do the things you want to do with the time you have left. And guess what? We don't know how much time there is, which is why we're in our journey right now is let's maximize that. I don't want to wait until we're 65, 67, whatever it is, and then you step off a cliff, or not step off a curb, break your ankle, and now you can't do the thing. So I think wealth is to be able to do those things. Abundance, I'm struggling with that one a little bit. Abundance, I guess, just having enough, the people maybe around you to live a satisfying, fulfilled life. I think, I guess that's what it is, because we're not really stuffed people. We're minimizing our lives right now. So as far as stuff concerned, we're not really stuffed people.
Yeah.
Haven't really been. It really gets back to that is, as at this point in our life, I think they're tied together. You want to have just enough resources to be able to do what you want to do on your own terms. And we want a legacy for Maddie. I think that's part of the spirit of my father and parents is we're not going to, zero out the checking account. She can bounce the check to the mortician. That's not the plan. I respect it if it is, but we want a legacy beyond us for Maddie in her life. So that's certainly part of our plan. Yeah. Within reason. She's not good with math, but she can divide by 1. So she knows she's in a good spot whenever that time comes. But I think wealth and having to be able on your terms to do what you want to do, to have just enough stuff. Not too much. At the end of the day, it's just stuff. Yeah. And someone's going to end up taking it to Goodwill or throwing it away. Yeah. So what's the damn point?
My goodness, man. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the opportunity for us to just kind of chat a little bit the way that we usually do, but do it in front of a couple of microphones, a couple of cameras, and share this with as many people as possible. And Rob, I don't know who's going to listen. I don't know who's going to listen. I don't know who's going to take it to heart, but my hope is that it ripples as far as it can possibly go. And that might even be because Sally's mentioned as many times as she is in here.
That's maybe her fault.
That's why
she abandoned me.
It goes way further than what would have happened if you and I just had this conversation. So just thank you for the way that you show up. Thank you for the way that you show up day to day as a leader, as a person. And for any of you that have resonated with the story, whether it's because you're a firefighter, because you have a family, or if it's just because there's pieces of the advice that was given that you want to share with someone else, send it out to them, make it happen in their life. This could be the gift that you give to someone else at just the right moment when they needed it. And just as we are reminded of often, and as you reminded us today, Rob, there's so much more to life than money. Come back and listen and watch as many episodes as you possibly can, because there definitely is more to life than money.
Thank you for listening to the More to Life Than Money podcast with your host, J.W. Rayhans, financial advisor, jw@rayhansfinancial.com. Guests are not affiliated with or registered with Cetera Wealth Services, LLC. Any information provided by guests is in no way related to Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, or its registered representatives, unless otherwise noted as a representative of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC. The opinions contained in this material are those of the author and not a recommendation or solicitation to buy or sell investment products. This information is from sources believed to be reliable, but Cetera Wealth Services, LLC cannot guarantee or represent that it is accurate or complete. Securities offered through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, doing insurance business in California as CFGAN Insurance Agency, LLC, California Insurance License Number 0644976, member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. California Insurance License Number 0M15552. The views depicted in this material are for informational purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice. 313 North Gilbert Road, Suite 200, Gilbert, Arizona 85234.